All right, we'll get kicked off here. There will still be some people joining surely over the next few minutes, but we'll go ahead and get started. Thanks everyone for coming to this month's webinar in the series. We're really excited to have someone great here from the Boston Consulting Group. Just by way of a quick agenda, I will give an introduction to Mark, who will be doing most of the presentation. We're really excited about having him here with us. Most of the Q&A will kind of maintain some space at the back end of this. If you can see in your user panel there, you can type questions to me, and I'll kind of triage those and surface them up, combine similar questions, and then ask Mark those questions closer to the end of this. We'll keep the total time at or just below an hour, and so we'll make sure that we're off here in about 55 minutes to get you back there. By way of introduction, and you saw some of this in the overview, like I said, we're really excited to have Mark. It was we feel it's a big get to get him into the series. We really appreciate him taking his time to do this. As you can see here, he's been at the Boston Consulting Group for a long time and has two kind of key important roles there. First is he's the practice area leader for the marketing and sales practice in all of North America. And then importantly and relevant to this discussion, he's the global lead for personalization and digital marketing. So we're excited about his client experience and the super rich and relevant details that he'll be able to share here. On kind of a more personal note, anybody that knows Mark that we talked about this webinar with just gushed about him, personally and as a partner and a colleague. So, again, we feel really honored to have him and to learn from him here about personalization and retail. We're going to turn the time over to Mark here, and he'll share his screen and kick it off, and then I'll pick it back up here at the end to do the Q&A. Mark, I'll turn the time over to you.
Perfect. Thank you so much, and I'm just going to share my screen here with the team. Great. Can you all see?
Yep, looking good.
Fantastic. Welcome, everyone, and very excited to talk to you about the topic that's nearest and dearest to my heart, which is personalization. It's really an amazing journey that a lot of brands are on these days as they realize the vision of really speaking to every customer in an individualized fashion, which was really a dream even just 5-10 years ago, and even today is very, very challenging. But all brands can make significant strides toward this more personalized form of engaging with their customers. And at the broadest sense, this slide shows you how to think about personalization. And it's really around creating the right experience, whether that be a marketing message or actually a service action, or a way you price or offer your products or services, or recommendations you make to your customers, deliver it across channels. And this is a critical piece where the integration of the channels is one of the most difficult things you as a marketer can undertake to do, because disparate systems, disparate teams are managing these various channels, and yet customers want a seamless experience, not just across your digital channels, but also across the physical and digital world. And then bringing in the right context, the right time to engage each customer, and doing that not just for your most valuable customers, but being able to do that for all customers is really what individualization at scale or personalization at scale is all about. We've done a lot of research at the Boston Consulting Group on this topic, including an in-depth look at this with thousands of customers in partnership with Google and others over the last year. One of the themes we find is that consumers are not valuing personalization for its own sake. When you actually ask them directly about do they want personalization, they'll rate some of those things low, as you see on the chart on the left here. But when you actually ask them about what they care about most, convenience, assortment, value, those are the things that personalization really unlocks for customers then at its best. So as you think about applying personalization for your brand, think about how you can use it to navigate customers to a much more convenient way to experience your service or select your offering, or curate that assortment for them in a tailored way, or offer the right value for the right customers. So you're investing in better value for the customers where you have the chance to build a deeper, longer relationship. Naturally, when we talk about personalization, especially in an era of GDPR and now CCPA and a lot of other regulations in this space, it's important to talk about data sharing and privacy. And it is an undoubtable trend that customers are becoming more aware and more considerate of how they are sharing their data. So when you, in our survey, ask customers how to rank different trade-offs against better value, better convenience versus data privacy comes out on top. Yet, in actual real life examples with brands, we see that when you create an offering for customers that is solving an immediate need for them, that is improving the experience for them, they are willing to share data. It's just important that it be an explicit consent and the sharing be done in a way that the consumer is benefiting as well. It's not just delivering value for the brand. And the value that can be delivered is enormous. So we studied a couple of hundred brands over the last year in detail globally, and we surveyed them along a number of dimensions to determine who were real personalization leaders. And in each category, there's about 10 to 15% of brands that emerge as personalization leaders that are investing in the technology, the data, the new ways of working, and the people needed to pull this off. And we consistently see that they're growing 6 to 10 points faster than the average category growth for their peers. And they're doing this through a number of different levers. We see in our other survey work as well that when you actually personalize the experience to customers in a nuanced way, you drive average order volume, AOV, up by about 40%. So people buy more for each trip. You're also increasing that basket size and adding items that they otherwise would not have bought at higher prices and upselling them. But then also improving the Net Promoter Score, NPS, basically the satisfaction of customers at the same time. So it's not just about selling more, it's also about improving that guest experience in the near term. A number of brands are doing this well, and we all know, Netflix as an early adopter of personalization. About 80% of their curate content that is streamed is based on personalized recommendations, and they've gone to extraordinary lengths to not just personalize those recommendations, but even use that to inform how they put together their content. For example, one of their series had 1 million different personalized types of trailers that was shown based on a library of different elements that was put together for each specific customer. And that same team actually has gone over to Stitch Fix and done the same for apparel. And so now we're seeing in beauty and apparel with the likes of Sephora and Nordstrom an emerging trend to curate the right offering for each customer, make it very much appealing to their taste in the moment. I'll talk about a few other examples in depth as we go, but I think in general, from all our work across industries, we see that, of course, the digital natives are ahead here in technology and consumer technology. They have been investing the longest, and they have built their tech stacks to enable personalization from the start. But even they have not reached full maturity on all dimensions. And frankly, it's race across all the other brands in every vertical, where the variance inside the vertical is greater than the variance across verticals. So within each vertical that you see here, restaurants, travel, beauty, apparel, department stores, there are winners that are figuring out how to do personalization smartly. Even brands that are not necessarily tens of billions of dollars in sales are figuring out ways to invest in personalization smartly to bring that to their customers. And of course, there are industries where those privacy concerns and data concerns, like banking, healthcare, insurance in particular, have held back companies from experimentation, which is really the lifeblood of personalization and pushing in this regard. And that's rightly so, but at the same time, there's huge opportunity to transform those industries by applying some of these concepts. So I think that's where the next wave will come from in terms of improved customer experience. Within retail specifically, we've also identified where are those best-in-class companies really differentiating and standing out from ones that are more nascent in personalization. And you see it across these various dimensions. When it comes to personalizing different channels, everybody's trying to apply some level of personalization to email and their website, and there's a lot of off-the-shelf tools to start to do that. But to really embed personalization into your mobile experience and tie the paid channels with your own channel data is much harder. So that's where some of these leaders are standing out the most. But as the numbers here show, even the leaders aren't applying personalization fully across all channels. They would rate themselves only as really unlocking personalization across maybe half their channels fully. And then when it comes to tactics, there's a wide spread as well. The easier things to do are things like retargeting or cart recovery, for web-based brands. And of course, some level of product recommendations with off-the-shelf algorithms. But to really do personalized elements of the user flow on the web or your mobile app, and to tie that in with your loyalty program or merchandising assortment, those are much more sophisticated capabilities that do require working cross-functionally across teams and investing in the data and technology pieces as well. When it comes to the enablers, the biggest piece, honestly, is the people. Yes, the data and technology are key, and I'll talk about those, but that's maybe 30% of the equation. Getting the operating model and the organizational focus and the alignment of the teams across marketing, analytics, technology, the business, working together in agile ways with a clear test and learn process is the biggest enabler. And so you see that in retail, as an example, the companies and brands we surveyed fall into these 4 tiers with a clear set of differentiators in each tier that you see listed on the page. And I won't go through all of them, and you can read some of them. They tie back to what I said before. I'll emphasize the numbers on the top instead. When it comes to engagement rates, things like click-through and response rates, you see massive uptick at each tier of 10, 20%, and then 50, 60% when you go through all the way to the top. We've also looked at how this translates to sales, and there is, again, that 6 to 10 point sales impact differential that shows up as you move to the highest tier. So the size of prize is massive for each brand. How do we make it happen? And it's clearly not easy. We say that at BCG and all our work, we found 4 things that have to come together for achieving personalization at scale. And that really has to start with the consumer-centric design. Too often my clients will put the cart before the horse in terms of investing in the data lake or investing in the new tech stack, and then thinking about the use cases. I really urge you to start with the use cases. What customer experiences, which channels are you going to make better, and how will that drive value? How much value will that drive? And then how are you going to line up the data, tech, and ways of working to deliver that? One of the brands I admire that has done this really well is Starbucks. And you see the journey they've been on over the last 3-4 years to bring personalization to all of a plethora of experiences. First starting by going from a segmented email program that was maybe able to put out 30 segments per week with a lot of manual work, with a long lead time to measure, to one that created almost endless variation, highly personalized to each customer, and tying in real-time data. Then extended it into their mobile app with all the gamified offers that you see if you're a Starbucks Rewards customer, that are dashes and streaks and games that invite you to explore more of their menu, to real-time recommendations in their mobile ordering app as they push more digital ordering, and then even how their digital menus show up in their drive-thrus and their stores, or even how their baristas interact with you. So they've gone through a very methodical journey to unlock these use cases, and each use case drove tremendous value, both for their customers in terms of improving the experience, how they engage with the product, how they explore their menu, but also for the business. And this is where, for a lot of brands, the mobile channel is becoming a tremendous unlock when it comes to personalization. Really, everyone engages in a different context in this channel, and it allows you to meet your customers in the moment. Bringing personalization into mobile is really a nascent opportunity for most brands that, if you can really unlock, can drive a tremendous behavior change and increase that connection with your brand. So that has been a powerful driver for Starbucks as well. If you look at how personalization came into their mobile app and their mobile offers and the level of individualization they were able to bring there. It showed up in the results as well, as they talked about, tripling of campaign results, a doubling of redemption, and tremendous growth in member revenue, as well as the number of members, by the way. One trend that I talk about a lot with my clients, actually more recently, is around bionic personalization, as I call it, which is this notion of the human physical experience, your frontline staff interacting with your customers, whether it's in the store or it's on a plane when you're an airline, or your call centers if you're a bank or pharmacy chain, how your frontline staff interact with customers and your digital experience and digital channels. We're seeing this in the luxury space and apparel space prominently. Many of these brands have been experimenting with this for a while, but it's increasingly spreading to other categories as well. So for example, on this page, you see the apparel retailer where the associate is leveraging some of the digital tools to understand a shopper who is interested in shoes, has explored that maybe on the mobile site, but didn't actually buy, and engaging with her to come to the store for an exclusive deal or event, and engage with that new offering that she knows is just right for her. Previously, this kind of personalization was only available to the top customers through clienteling and personal assistance. Now it is actually available for the best brands. They're doing it across the majority of their customer base by enabling these sales associates to know each customer and then also have the tools to quickly and easily engage with them at scale. In the world of travel, some of our airline clients are completely changing their view on this as well. Many of them had a campaign mindset, and I see this across other clients as well, where each marketing campaign was set up as its own campaign. The marketing team would create the creative, would the data science team, for those that are sophisticated brands, would pull the targeted list and they'd send out the precision targeted campaign. But when you apply this approach at scale, it becomes a very disjointed approach across campaigns. So for this client, what ended up happening was that customers, the most valuable customers, got bombarded by messages from all the different product teams and marketing teams, and 80% of the resources were focused on just getting the campaigns out the door. We flipped this on its head and said, what if we actually put in the work up front to build a customer DNA, a 360 view of each customer, an experience library where we had all the content ready to go, the key campaigns, whether they be offers or product recommendations or nurture campaigns or triggers. And then we actually focused the bulk of the work on the decisioning, who should get what when. And that's where 80% of the work ended up focusing on learning and adapting. Which customers do we want to engage with on a daily basis? Which customers best open that email on a Friday afternoon versus Sunday? Which customers are best notified via push notification for this particular type of message in this particular moment? That's where I think the puck is headed for the marketing teams of the future as they think about how to bring this to life. But it has required a significant change, not just of the technology and the data, but most importantly for the organization. If you think about how content got created on the left versus on the right, that was a monumental shift, both in how the process was structured as well as how the teams were organized. And you see that in this quick diagram. So in this new world, actually it unleashed the product teams, those that own the P&Ls, to really come up with the strategies and design the best content that they possibly could. But then there were a set of centralized functions, the analytics function, the personalized marketing execution function, and the measurement function that became centralized and built the brain, if you will. What is the next best action that one should deliver to each customer? But it was also important that this wasn't done in a black box. The product teams and the marketers knew what rules govern that brain, and also how many impressions were delivered for each of their products, and even got recommendations on campaigns that just weren't jiving with customers, where product teams could really focus on improving their content instead of spending their time just getting the campaigns out the door. And this is where AI and machine learning can really make a difference. In this example, and when we talk about personalization and test and learn, most companies today are just doing A/B testing. They'll have a campaign that they run, and then maybe they'll have a different version of that campaign and run it and see which one performed the best. But when you really put in place this model that I described before, you can really apply machine learning techniques which say, actually, for every customer, just running that campaign once, I may not know the full answer. I may be 70% sure that that's the best campaign in that moment, but I'll need to rerun it and learn and see what happens and use that data again and again to inform the next interaction. And setting the process up and the organization up in this way enables you to apply these kinds of approaches. To do that, you also do need the personalization stack. There's a lot of components here, and if you actually looked at the vendors on behind each of these boxes, there's thousands of them, and every year it feels like 1,000 get added. And I'm sure a lot of you, if you're in this space, get calls from many of them. So it's important to think through what's your starting points, which are the elements that you really don't have in place. And again, link it back to the use cases. You're not going to be able to unlock this across all channels and with all your customer data all at once. But what are the bits that are going to be most valuable for driving your business going forward? And then how do you quickly put that in place, either with off-the-shelf elements, vendors, and which pieces do you need to build? The most important piece, though, I would say, is that you do have that brain set up in a way where it's not a black box. It's fine to use off-the-shelf recommendation engines or elements or even algorithms, as long as you know how the components fit together and what rules govern what the customer gets. And that's where really then the data, the technology needs to come together with the biggest piece, which is the processes, the ways of working, the operating model. And that's where I think this image of the operating model and the organizational piece being so much of that iceberg is really telling and important in how to bring this to life. It's hard to get the value of this without really unlocking that cross-functional coordination across teams. And to do that, what has been the most helpful for most of my clients is really applying this 1% rule. So bringing together a cross-functional squad, arming them with a way to quickly measure their experiments and just get 1% better every week. If you can have that team of marketers, analytics folks, technology folks, and business people sit around a table and look at a dashboard that every week shows them what happened last week and brainstorm what are the 3 quick things we could do next week to get just a little bit better, by the end of the year, you will have delivered massive impact and change. And that's the biggest rule in personalization, I believe, that you've got to break it down into bite-sized chunks because it is so complex and there are so many different directions you can go. But focusing the team around this kind of rule is very helpful. The biggest enabler here is the rapid measurement. If the team doesn't have the dashboards, if the measurement takes weeks and weeks and weeks and is unreliable, then this kind of approach cannot work. So there is a bit of investment in the measurement that has to happen. And when we survey companies and executives around this, the challenges are definitely clear. On the technical side, data centralization, technology, lack of technology integration rise to the top, and often become a limiter to advances. But again, if your technology team is telling you the data lake will take 3 years to build, think about, do I have some transactional data? Do I have some customer data? How can I integrate those a little bit better to deliver the couple of use cases that I need to do? And what can I do with off-the-shelf components like a recommendation engine I can quickly plug in versus, a big build that I have to really wait for? And I'm sure a lot of you are feeling the pieces on the right, just too few personnel, especially on the data science and data engineering side. It's the hardest area to attract and retain talent in, and these kinds of programs can take big budgets. So selling in the vision and the dream at the senior executive level is really critical. Oftentimes the types of journeys that I described start at the CEO level and the board level with explicit alignment and approval on the investments required, but also clear goals and KPIs on how it's going to lead to value. And then the most important piece is this cross-functional coordination. What are some ways of working that need to be put in place to start that learning and rapid adoption? So this gives you a sense of the level of investment. Just again, looking at the retail vertical, and this does vary a little bit by vertical, but it is on the order of 1% or so of sales that many of these players are investing in personalization. A lot of that is in capital investments in system, but frankly, at least half of it is in people. And the executives at least tell us that that's only going to go up. And I think they're right in terms of just the number of systems that need to come together and the complexity as you add more channels, more types of use cases to the stack. So when I look back at the last half hour or so, I've gone through a lot. I've shared a lot of examples and ways to think about it. But a few things are really important at the end of the day, and the key takeaways for me, if you walk away with just a few things from the talk today. I think the most important piece is building that continuous learning cycle, and this is a piece you can get started on today, no matter your starting point. How are you going to put together a SWAT team? How are you going to arm them with rapid measurement and data, and build that continuous learning cycle so you can get better every week? The 1% rule, if you will. And experimentation speed is the new competitive advantage. So the faster you can get those experiments out, the more you can get experiments out, the better. Stitch Fix, as an example, has explicit measurements around the number of experiments they seek to launch, and it numbers in the hundreds at any one time. And they do expect a majority of them to fail, but they will fail fast and fail cheap, and learn from them and move on and incorporate the learnings. To do that all, you do need to change the ways of working. For most companies, the analytics, the marketing, the technology teams speak different languages. They sit in different parts of the building, and they don't know how to collaborate together. So bringing together these SWAT teams that can show the way, show a better way, and start to build momentum is a great way to break down those silos. It is also important that you do pilot with a view to scale, and we didn't touch on this enough so far, but I'll just reemphasize it here. I see a lot of companies launching one-off pilots without a view to how that actually will drive value for the business. So being intentional on the use cases you pick early on in the journey and having a clear view how by month 6, that can actually be a game-changing capability for the company, even if it won't have the perfect tech stack or data or processes behind it, but it can deliver real business results, is something you have to have in mind to be able to continue the journey so that you can keep funding the journey. So think about which use cases for you can act as the bank, as one of my clients like to think about this. That can then fund the next set of use cases and important investments in people and technology. And lastly, and most importantly, get started now. There's a lot to do and a lot to go through this journey, but if you don't start now, you will stay at the tier you're at, and everyone has room to grow and room to get better in this area.
Beautiful. Thanks, Mark. I appreciate you taking the time. We have a number of questions here. I don't know that we'll get through them all, but we'll take kind of 5 or 10 minutes and go through some if that works. And if you are listening and you have questions, you can feel free to type them in. And again, I'll try to triage and bubble some up to the top. So one good one, someone asked, you mentioned it's important to start with the customer view. What is that discovery process? And yeah, what would that look like to kind of kick that off?
Yeah. So a few things I'll point out there. Every company, every brand has a different level of data about their customers. And it's whether it's first-party data and you actually know the customer's transactional longitudinal history over time, or you're maybe a CPG company that's more reliant on consumer surveys, there's always a great starting point for you to understand, at least at a high level, what is the segmentation of your customers? How do they move to higher levels of value over time? This is an important thing that I think a lot of companies miss in that early discovery phase, is what I call the notion of customer pathways. How do customers move to higher lifetime value? It may be that they establish a habit early on. For example, some of my restaurant clients, it is about coming in regularly. And then it's about menu exploration and moving into these different categories. For others, it will be another set of things. So understanding what are those unlocks and behaviors that you want to drive with those customers to build a deep relationship with your brand is very critical. And it's also about making choices. Which customers do you really want to win with, and where is that really not the right focus for now, at least?
Great. Someone asked, and I'll try to condense the question. Basically, it was on the time that you were talking about Starbucks, but I think one of your later slides actually relates to this, which is, what are the cultural impediments? What cultural impediments do you see in organizations that can't quite get this implemented? Or, asked another way, there's, on a prior slide you asked about, or you mentioned, hey, it's hard to get the right staff and the right team. I imagine if you have kind of senior level buy-in, it's a lot easier to get that budget and to get everything lined up. What are the best ways that you've seen brands kind of get the senior leadership on board, or to help kind of permeate this throughout the organization?
Yeah, so actually senior leadership is important, but there's something more fundamental. Just to tackle the senior leadership piece, I mean, I think painting the vision, showing what this could be, and really describing and bringing to life the from-to journey that the customer will go through, I think always wins the day when it comes to building that senior alignment. And then, of course, showing the business value behind it, how large the opportunity here is from a sales standpoint is huge. But I think that the hard part really comes to when there is that buy-in and people say go, actually getting these teams to work together is incredibly challenging. It's simple things, and it's not a lack of intent or goodwill. I think it's even language. So, for example, when there is a need to describe use cases, if you sit down a marketer, a data scientist, and a technologist, typically they'll think about that very differently. And even the language they'll use will be misunderstood by one or the other. That's why I think the most powerful tool we've used with our clients is actually getting a SWAT team or squad, if you will, or as Amazon calls them, the two pizza team together in a room and actually working through it together, because it won't be two departments that are sitting in two sides of the building working together achieving this. It has to be a small team that's truly cross-functional, that has the skill set to work across and make these decisions and move fast. If you're having to bring 100 people together to get a use case stood up, you're never going to get anywhere. Now, that being said, it's not that one IT person has to know everything. They're still going to, of course, pull on the broader resources of the organization. But who is really on point? Who's that core set of folks that can look at the dashboard and really wake up every day caring about how they're going to get better the next week?
Yeah, that makes total sense. One more here that we've got, maybe we might have time for a couple, but one was about that slide that you shared that had the distribution of different industries and how far along the personalization journey was and the variance within that industry. Do you find that any of those that are on the lower end, maybe healthcare or insurance, that there's structural reasons why that's the case, or have they just been late to this party? And how might those at the bottom think about leapfrogging their competitors in that way? Yeah,
it's interesting. I think there's two pieces. One is what I said, which is obviously the data elements and the regulation, privacy concerns in those industries at the bottom, not surprisingly, are the toughest. And so that's why these companies have been risk averse. But I think there's an organizational piece to it too. Most of my banking clients, for example, they've got different silos at the bank, thinking about mortgages versus savings accounts versus other products. Then you've got different owners for the various channels, the branches and the branch associates versus the email channel versus the paid marketing channel versus the direct marketing channel that deals with the credit card offer will be owned by different individuals. And then marketing will sit separately from data science, and they might be strong in data science, but more on the risk side. So you've just got even more fragmentation than most of my consumer or retail clients. Although you'd think that many of my clients in those industries say they're siloed, but I think some of these industries at the bottom are usually organized in even more fragmented ways when it comes to delivering a seamless cross-channel customer experience. So solving that will be a critical challenge, and that's why you see those industries as well. The companies at the right are more digital natives or more smaller companies that have used different ways to organize to tackle some of those challenges.
That actually leads to probably our last question that we'll have time for here, and it was about company size. Do you find it easier for bigger or smaller companies, or are there different tactics that you might recommend for, just bigger companies? So if you think about like a grocery store that has a bigger footprint, more boxes versus a smaller one, is there different ways that you'd recommend getting started, or is the advice pretty universal on those kind of key takeaways at the end?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there are some different tactics. So for my small and mid-sized clients, and this goes up to even companies that are, let's say, $1 billion or $2 billion in sales, many of them will be best served by starting with off-the-shelf tools. Even versus 3 years ago, there's a lot off the shelf that you can buy. SaaS companies that are emerging and recommendation engines, if I just go to that example, that are actually quite good, that you can plug in and integrate with a customer data platform that pulls together your data, customer data that might be sitting in different systems. So for these small and mid-sized clients, leveraging a lot of buy versus build is one tactic that we often employ. For the largest brands, typically the issue is they can't do it all. So really narrowing down on which geography, which customer segment, which product, which channels are we going to bite off first, and build a use case family around that we can really show value with. And really I encourage them to say, if you're a brand that's more than a few $1 billion in sales, think of how do you drive the next $100 million of sales with a family of use cases, whether that be a channel, a market, a customer segment, and go after that. Aim high, and that will require you to think cross-functionally, but also how do you unlock that without a 100-person team? And think about that with the technology you have with small augmentations. Those companies also do have the resources, though, to own more of the brain and intelligence for these large brands, and that's why these personalization leaders are pulling ahead. It's not just about investing in the data and technology; it's investing in the experimentation and the learning. If you're a brand that has run experiments and built that engine that I described that had the library and every interaction leverage machine learning to optimize and feed into the next interaction, and you've been doing that for 3 years and your competitor is just beginning, you've built a massive competitive advantage. And so that's where I think the largest brands have an opportunity to invest, to pull ahead, and time is of the essence here.
That's great. Yeah, we're obviously a little bit biased, but we certainly agree on the last point as well. I think we're out of time here, Mark. We really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to come here and share with us this great content. We will be sharing this webinar. We'll can pull it together, tighten it up, and then put it both on our website and send it out to all the attendees and those who registered but couldn't make it. And looking forward to doing another in our webinar series next month, so stay tuned and we'll share more information about that. Again, just want to say thanks to Mark and everybody else that's joined, and we'll see you next month.